Thank you so much. Really appreciate the time. Hi, everybody. Happy Monday, and thanks for joining us. We really appreciate the opportunity. As you just mentioned, I am Kristin Mason. I'm the SVP of US Sales for Studio71. And as he also just mentioned, I have the pleasure of chatting with James Gregson, who is the head of Lego's social content studio. So everything is awesome about today's session with us. Did you see that, James?
I did.
Obviously, the focus of this topic is marketing to Gen Z, and they're ever evolving. We've talked about it all day, technology savvy digital natives, 5 to 24, right? So I think what's even more awesome is the actual product that you represent, James. And it goes without saying, hopefully you guys can see some of my Legos in the background, right? He's got even more than me. And I feel like I literally only play with Legos with my 5-year-old son. So it's pretty impressive. But I think it's pretty amazing as one of the most iconic brands in the world, loved by all ages, and it's really stood the test of time. For a quick update, and since I think it was a good lead in with YouTube right before us, for those of you not aware of Studio71, we're focused on providing brand safe video entertainment online. We have a super engaged audience, and we're actually the #1 YouTube partner in minutes viewed. And the content that our talent produces, they're those YouTube stars that we were talking about, right? They make up almost 10% of online video watched in the US. And we focus on two sides. So we have scalable media opportunities across YouTube and OTT with transparent content alignment and super high brand safety standards, because that can always be a tricky place to play with brand marketers. But then we also offer direct connections to that super influential talent for unique custom content opportunities. So in that vein, we're really focused on Gen Z, and they're consuming that content, as you guys know, that keeps them connected. And they're twice as likely to actually gravitate our content, Studio71's content, YouTube content, other types of social platforms, right, than traditional television. And so while Studio71 isn't a household name, our content is. But I think what I kind of wanted to lead in on the flip side, everybody knows, what Lego is on a global level, which absolutely speaks to the power of the brand. But I figured we'd kind of kick it off, James, if it works for you, to kind of talk about your role specifically at the internal creative agency and what that means from a responsibility and a day-to-day.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the intro. And yeah, so hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. So I head up a fairly new department within our internal creative agency. We do have an internal creative agency, which is a fairly trendy thing at the moment. It's been around for quite a while, but our team's fairly new. It's about 2 years old. And my team's responsibility is essentially to create a lot of the organic content across Lego-owned social channels. We have duplicative setups within EMEA and within APAC as well. And we, as I said, we really lean into creating what we believe is still a valuable content strategy in organic social content. We also play sort of a consultative role in some of our larger product-related campaigns to ensure that we're flexing that organic content muscle as well.
I mean, I think that's like having a social studio, right, is key to reaching those Gen Zers, because when it comes down to it, they were all born when smartphones and Wi-Fi, I mean, my son can use an iPad better than my mother, right? So it's like completely commonplace, but it also means it's ingrained in their daily life, and they have that need for instant gratification, so it's information, it's entertainment, and the only thing that's constant is that we need to keep up with them. So, for our end, it's always like the creators themselves, right? And not necessarily about the distribution channel specifically. It's more like, what is that awesome content they create? Where does it align, right? And I think it seems kind of similar from your strategy. It's interesting too, just because I feel like in your social content, like you want to build brand loyalty, but also, it's not necessarily about like buying the product. It's that creating that mentality. So how do you structure your team in the different environments, or do you focus really more on one core social channel?
Yeah, I mean, I think, listen, Lego's got an interesting challenge that maybe not a lot of businesses have, in that, we are, in some cases, trying to reach everybody. right? And the objectives there are fairly broad-reaching, right? There is so many opportunities for us from a content marketing standpoint that we can go in so many different directions. Where that becomes challenging, right, is it doesn't encourage great focus. It encourages disparate thoughts with loose business objectives, right? So it's very much, I spend a lot of my time bringing ideas back to earth and trying to ground them in a business objective or a product marketing objective or an audience objective. And some of the times it's okay for us to try and create, engagement first content for the sole purpose of engaging as large an audience as we can, right? But a lot of the times I'm trying to narrow that focus and trying to make sure that the team is conscious of what is the business objective to creating engagement content, say around the holiday season, right? And it, as I said, it's just being very purpose driven behind what it is we're creating and why we're creating it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, when we connected earlier, that purpose-driven marketing is definitely a key point to how you connect them, and I think it's the same thing as well. Like when you're coming up with like inspiration, right? It's like, there's so many aspects to how you can build that brand loyalty. And I think, my son just went back to school today. So, like using Legos, whether it's in school or at home to foster that imagination, it's really endless. So it's like, how do you even think of how to come up with that social content? Like what inspires you and the team?
Oh, that's a really good question. I mean, I think, we try and take inspiration from all over the place, from, brands like Bon Appetit, for example, and their YouTube strategy, which I think is, something that I really find strategically really interesting about how they approach that, from, other creators as well. So, AFOLs, adult fans of Lego, they are some of the most creative content creators out there, across the spectrum of content creators, and they've really inspired us in terms of how we feature product, right? And we've done various social A/B tests where, product on a catalog style products on a white background perform, I think, 100% more than 100% worse in terms of driving link clicks than lifestyle imagery of our products on a shelf or that sort of stuff. That was a shock to our product marketing team when we shared that as an A/B test. So I think, we try and take inspiration from everywhere, and not just the toy category. We want to be bigger than the toy category. We want to be an experience brand. So that's looking as well to what does the physical play experience look like, or the physical experience in a Apple retail store, and how we could bring that to our retail environment. It does, as I said, we really try and take inspiration from all walks of life.
Yeah, it's funny talking about experience. I know that you're familiar already because we chatted, but I went personally to the Legoland of California and just going and staying in that castle with my 5-year-old. I mean, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, if you'll like slap my hand for bringing up Disneyland, but we've been to Disneyland twice actually. And he was like, well, this stinks compared. Legoland was a dream. I mean, dancing with the characters at night, even like the breakfast in the morning, it was like, but it really is, right? It's a total experience. And I think, it's hard, right? Because then positioning that then in a digital first environment, all the experiential stuff. So like, what do you do to kind of connect the dots on that thing?
Yeah, I think, look, you look at what's COVID's biggest impact on marketing, right? You've got to talk about that physical experience, right? We talk about, internally brick in hand, or how do we get brick in the hands of consumers? And the answer is in COVID world, you don't. I think we're still looking at how to bring that physical play experience in a digital sort of one-on-one experience, and it's challenging. Is the very, very short answer to that. I mean, I think we look at, from a general social standpoint, we're trying to convey the play experience in a number of different ways, right? But that's leaning on influencers in some cases, right, to showcase product in a different way. It's also creating, a series of different content types, right? So we talk about audiences and how we apply that to the content that we create, right? And a high affinity audience has different content needs than a low affinity audience, right? But that doesn't mean that we should only serve one audience versus the other audience. We need to be sure we're creating content across that affinity spectrum, right? So at a basic level, we're creating longer form, what we call designer videos, but they're sort of 5 to 10 minute videos where it's the Lego designer walking through every element of a product, right? And all the features and the design decisions, because that resonates with our high affinity audience. I don't think, sorry, the moms or dads out there, the low affinity shopper that's looking for a new toy is going to watch that entire video, right? So how do we create a similar type of content or re-edit that long form video into a shorter format that resonates with that low affinity audience?
Yeah, no, it's really interesting, and obviously, COVID and what's happening makes it quite difficult, and you really have to be adaptability is key, right? Like, and that's one of our whole things. Like, you can't produce content 5, 6, 10 months in advance, right? You got to be on the pulse of what's happening because you never know what's going to happen. Yeah. One thing I can say about your business, and I'm like, I know I'm not the only one, because every mom friend I spoke to, I mean, I was treating Easter like it was Christmas, and I think he got like 6 different Legos just because I needed something to do to fill the time, right? But it is, it's interesting because you don't want to take advantage of, I think I read something that you were writing, you don't want to use the pandemic as a marketing opportunity, right? But it is like how you reassess how the content is posted and making sure that it's perceived positively, right? But I think, there are going to be some things that now that we've shifted into this new normal, are there things that you will continue that you've learned in terms of strategy that you might, continue to adopt as you move forward that you might not have been thinking about before?
Definitely. Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I think, what happened with our COVID response or COVID marketing strategy was, and I've heard of various people saying, no way, they didn't do this. That they're just saying that. But we really had a zero commercial objective with our content marketing strategy, our social content marketing strategy, because we didn't feel that was a right place to do that. We weren't trying to sell products. In fact, we really leaned into an engagement and entertainment first content strategy across social around COVID, right? Because we didn't have access to external production companies and external casting, we leaned into all sorts of fun areas of the business, right? From everything to, we have a, brand curator that manages Lego House, which is basically our brand museum, headquartered in Billund in Denmark, and we leaned on him as a personality to create content on our behalf to share that out. We leaned into our designers, our model designers, who were actually parents. And not parents, they're wives and husbands, and got them to create content and all those sort of things. So it was a really fun opportunity to lean into just internal sources of content. So we'll start doing a lot more of these sort of designer videos where we've got live streams of Lego Master Model Builders, which is, yes, every kid's dream job. They exist. That is their title. And, do short form videos with them. Because quite frankly, they're free, right? They're resources that we have access to. Obviously, they have a job and they do need to build life-size models, but they have access to a great sort of imagination and information that certainly our medium to high affinity fans really engage with.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And it's funny, actually, because again, during COVID, my child probably watched too much TV, but it's so, as I have so many police Legos right downstairs because he wants to be a policeman, but it's very cute. So I have so many of those, and he makes me like go to YouTube and type in police Lego, right? So like, it's actually really interesting because not only obviously is the content that you guys create, right, or the collaborations, et cetera, which I think we should talk about in a minute, but there are so many, I don't know if the right way to call them is like rogue creators, right? Of people doing like stop motion or just, just playing with Legos and seeing things. So, sometimes they're in other languages. It's irrelevant to him because he doesn't care. He just wants to watch the Legos move. But how do you measure like your social content differently? Like, and basically that success. And then are you attributing that to these creators in a different way? Are you attributing the success that they may have, the millions of views or whatever?
I mean, we definitely do. We do separate them, right? Obviously, we definitely measure sort of our YouTube success within our own channel ecosystem within YouTube. But I think also we're very conscious about the creators that are out there that are creating great content. What happens on YouTube, obviously, from a content ID perspective and a creator perspective, we're not in there trying to steal what we believe is our IP. That's not obviously, if they download our video and then upload it as ours, then there might be a different issue. But we at the end of the day, we want to celebrate creators, right? And however we can do that, we will do that, right? So in the past, we've got playlists on our YouTube channel from, non-Lego owned channels of Lego content. We have to lean into that because that is also the user experience, right? I think if we look at, I think we just, not personal plug here, we just reached 10 million subscribers on YouTube. But if you were to look at the number of views, the percentage number of views that come from youtube.com/Lego, right? Our homepage, it's less than something like 2%, right? It's a the user experience within, say, YouTube is the homepage, right? Or suggested videos. So it's much less about the channel ownership as it is about great content. And great content doesn't always come from a brand.
I completely agree. And I think it's interesting too, because, like we were saying before, all the collaborations, partnerships, licensees, I mean, there's the Star Wars, Minions. I mean, I have just random NASA stuff behind me. No big deal, right? the launch to Mars. But I mean, it's across the board. Harry Potter, Ghostbusters, Toy Story. I think I have something from everything. But yeah, and then there's also like the real life heroes, your Lego movies. You got the TV show, which I did start watching. I think it spun off. I didn't actually realize because I'm not a UK citizen, but it started in the UK, right? And then spun off to the US, I think, with Will Arnett here. Yeah.
Was it UK, Australia, US,
wow.
And now it's going to other markets, Belgium, I think, next, and then the Netherlands. But yeah, it was a fun show. But to your point, right, I think if we talk about Gen Z, and I'm sure everyone's maybe potentially sick about talking about the categories of we know who they are, but obviously nostalgia is a big component of what makes up Gen Z and their desires, right? And I think nothing speaks more. Oh damn! I did have the set on the floor the other day, but we just launched a partnership with Nintendo, right? Which I don't think there's more of a nostalgia-driven brand than Nintendo, right? And even as part of that, our highest price point SKU in that lineup is the old Nintendo Entertainment System, like in a boobs tube style TV, like the whole thing is fully buildable. Like if that doesn't speak to Gen Z and nostalgia, I don't know what does, right? So I think a lot of those things make my job from a content marketing standpoint very easy in terms of engaging with that audience. Similarly with Star Wars, with Marvel, with all those sort of things, it does make our job really easily. I think what I get energized by and excited by is those conversations with partners where, typically you have a product marketing counterpart and a product marketing counterpart, and it becomes a very much a sales-driven conversation. But if I can interject myself into that conversation, you can start having what's potentially really exciting, sort of more longer-term content marketing conversation about what content can we create for your channels and what content can we co-create for our channels. And it becomes this much less siloed conversation, much more of a let's create awesome content together for our audiences collectively. And that's a really fun place to play. It doesn't always happen, but that's the gold standard from my perspective.
You pretty much have the coolest job ever. I'm going to call it out. Yeah, and I think too, what's interesting, right? You play in this role where you're able to create all this amazing content, and then you're working within. You're technically in the creative agency, but that's tied to marketing, right? And marketing, it comes with challenges, and I know this is something that we deal with at Studio71, right? We do a lot. I think we were talking through even just programmatic alignment. And it's interesting because the target is quote unquote the me's of the world and the you's of the world, right? Those that have children, in the household. But even though I am a Lego lover, and like this is my 40-year-old brother's, little horse from 1982 or whatever it is, right? But we are your consumer, but we're not Gen Z, and technically you're that younger Gen Z, right? Too. So it is those that we fall into the restrictions and laws with COPA, et cetera. So how does that change your strategy? Because you want to reach me because I'm buying it, but you really want to suck in my 5-year-old son who is obsessed, right? And in a nice way. So like, what is that? Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I know you're not really trying to target him, but
no, I mean, listen, I think, I've worked in other categories that have a similar challenge, whether it's video games or whatever it may be. I think Lego takes brand safety and things like COPA more seriously than any other brand I've ever experienced. Which I think in the world of things like The Social Dilemma, if anyone's seen that Netflix documentary, and other challenges around social and its overall pervasiveness and potential source of negativity, I think that's a good thing, right? So, at a basic level, we have a very, very strict partnership or sort of channel partnership process, right, that looks at why we work with various platforms and why we don't work with various platforms. I don't need to go into details of who those are, but suffice to say that we are extremely cautious about those things. And if we come across various challenges, we are, I think, with good reason in the current environment, pretty reactive to those scenarios to make sure that we are protecting kids and protecting our consumers, right? So even with our internal sort of digital ecosystem, right? So we have Lego Life, which is a COPA compliant for kids online community, app-based community. All of that content is pre-moderated. Every single piece of content is manually pre-moderated, and yeah, it's quite an impressive thing to be a part of in that sense.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's amazing how much content that you can create. And I think like when you're looking at what the opportunities are, it just gets, it's all over, but then you do have to kind of, you do have a target, right? And that Gen Z there, I actually, you were showing me some of the stuff that you have behind you. I think it's amazing because there are, even me, I mean, like I said, Lego lovers over here. We go to, well, pre-COVID, we used to go 23rd Street, and my husband works in Rock Center, and we were in one of those two Lego stores like pretty much every other week, right? And so there are a lot that are older skewing too. So you're not just the 5 to 8, right? There are ones that it's aspirational for the younger kids to be able to build the 12 plus or even 16 plus, but some of the ones that you have. Do you want to tell me a little bit about how your strategy around that?
I mean, historically, right, we had very purposeful adult Gen Z related product lines, right? Whether it was our architecture line, which everything from the box design, the package design, to the price point, to the instruction booklet was much older skewed. And I think that's evolved significantly, right? And that all happens at a product level, at a product marketing level, at a design level, right? So everything from the Nintendo partnership to, the $450 Millennium Falcon, to all those sort of elements. Like, we know clearly a 16-year-old kid that's not the prime consumer for that. If it is, God bless him and or his parents. But it might take him a long time to build it. So there's that too. I think for us, what has been most interesting was, as a result of COVID, categories like puzzles, right? I think I remember seeing a stat, the puzzle market increased by like 387% or something.
I bought 5. My husband was horrified. Like 1,000-piece each.
Totally. And we actually saw a similar sort of increase on product lines that maybe didn't have the marketing support that other product lines did, and all these sort of other variables. But what we saw basically is a massive influx of adults, new adult consumers. And, you could pontificate about why. I think there's a bunch of reasons potentially why. But I'm excited from a marketing standpoint is we've got a whole new, challenge from a retention standpoint of how do we retain these new customers who are adults, who are likely within that Gen Z category, and keep them within our Lego system of play. So that's a really fun sort of challenge and unexpected outcome of COVID.
Yeah, that's definitely, it's a challenge, but I think it's interesting, right? Because it's imagination, and that I'm not saying I have much free time, because I don't, but I got back the hour on both sides of my day of my commute. So 2 hours a day where I historically was commuting. I only live in Hoboken, but into the city, and that difference. So you have a little bit more of the quote unquote downtime. And I think that gives people the opportunity to engage, but I think it'll be really interesting. And like we said before, the nostalgia combined with the cool new, partnerships and licensees and all the different stuff that you have. I mean, I would love to build a city, behind you. My husband's Dutch, actually. And so, I mean, if I could he would die. If I replicated his hometown of Zwolle in the Netherlands, it would be, it'd be pretty amazing. So, I did have another question, just because obviously social is real time. And I was thinking about this before, because it's like you guys have a constant eye on your social channels, and you guys are quick to engage, and that purpose-driven marketing like we were talking about. But in addition to obviously COVID, there's been, this year has been, I don't want to call it a doozy, but it's been a very interesting, ever-changing year, right? And so you're social, which means you got to be up to speed with that. Do you have any examples of things that you guys are working on in the coming months, weeks, or currently that are about, current events and things like that maybe are not known to some people?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, listen, everyone wants their own Oreo Super Bowl social piece, right? Basically, I spent a lot of time sharing the expectation with various senior stakeholders that that's not a realistic expectation. And while I appreciate everyone wanting that opportunity or wanting to strive for that, there's hundreds of reasons why that opportunity in real life actually happened and how it happened. And, I assume anyone and everyone knows it, but if they don't, right, that the client and the agency were in one room as the lights went off during that New Orleans Super Bowl, and then they created that great asset that got tons of traction, right? So everyone, from a real-time content marketing standpoint, wants that Super Bowl moment. As I said, I think that's an unrealistic expectation. What is a realistic expectation is to ensure that you have the process set up so that you can react in that way if the opportunity happens. We are lucky enough that we are, one of those mass appeal, mass awareness brands that could potentially lean into an opportunity like that. I think we, across the Social Studio teams, are very cautious not to overflex that muscle, and only to flex that muscle where it makes absolute sense, right? So, there are, for example, Chadwick Boseman passing away, Black Panther, we have a significant presence with Marvel, and it just so happened as well that we have an African-American or Black Lego AFOL fan creator who is also fantastic at photographing his work on Instagram. And he shared something, and, the stars aligned, and we, looked around understanding that we should probably react to something and not just post something like a minifigure, do something a little bit more dynamic. And how do we do that? And then we have quick process and turnaround approval set up so that we're getting Marvel's approval on that reaction in near real time right? The process is in place to enable us. That doesn't mean that we need to do it every single time, right? And I think that's the one thing that I'm much more focused on is not saying no, that sounds wrong, but making sure that we're doing it for the right opportunities and not just because we can do it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I feel like that was a perfect example of reacting, and you don't want to do it like, which no offense to many marketers, but often marketers react and it's like 6 weeks after or 4 weeks after. You need to do it in that kind of real time-esque kind of state. And I think it's amazing that you guys were able to get that together so quickly and get that approval.
I'll add the one fun component with that is, we did have, I guess you could say, a Super Bowl moment in that sense, the Oreo Super Bowl moment, in the sense that when we responded to the Tesla Cybertruck response, right, which was, we saw that trending on Twitter. Our team in APAC created the asset, but I believe that process from ideating to producing to publishing was less than 6 hours, right? And I think that's still our top 3 tweet of all time.
Wow.
But I'd like to remind everyone internally and all our big creative directors who spend a lot of time and a lot of money creating large, long form TVC style pieces and then ask us to put it on social, that, that most successful tweet of all time costs $0 to create and 6 hours from beginning to end. And sorry, but maybe your TV commercial won't perform, your $1 million TV commercial won't perform as well on social for all the reasons that anyone in the world knows. But it's a fun one.
Well, it is fun. It is fun. So speaking of, you mentioned Twitter in there. You mentioned Instagram before. Obviously, we've talked about YouTube. A question from the audience was actually reaching Gen Z isn't just about having a solid TikTok strategy, which I know was probably a topic of the day. So, what other types of new media and what content should brands be leveraging to reach that younger audience? Any suggestions?
Yeah, I mean, for us, I still, and listen, 2020 is a unique situation. I think prior to the things like the social dilemma and the various challenges that I think the primary channels like Facebook and Instagram have seen potentially, we are still leaning more heavily into those platforms. Obviously, there are certainly some challenges from a paid media standpoint that we have, because we believe those platforms also need to be doing some things better from a compliance standpoint. But I still think from a potential reach opportunity, those platforms are, as to Gen Z, those platforms are as relevant as ever, potentially. I've yet to see the strong challenges against that yet, although I do envision them happening fairly soon.
Very fair. All right, I got a few for you, so I'm gonna not talk and just keep going. We had one which was, what can heritage brands, so obviously Lego, learn from newer digital first brands when it comes to authentically marketing to Gen Z? I think that's
agility for sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, I like to say that traditionally Lego is like moving the Titanic through the Hudson. It takes a lot of people to change direction, and even all to go the same direction, right? We are a manufacturing business at our heart, and our product development process historically was something like 18 months long, right? So we were planning campaign strategies. Right, so I have a good idea of what products we're launching in 2022, right? How do you apply a social media marketing strategy to a product launching in 2022 when we don't know if TikTok is still going to be alive in 2022, right? It's those sort of things that we have struggles with, but I think we always look at smaller brands, brands like Pantone that are really, really focused on creative more so than anything. Obviously, because that's the background of their brand. I'm pretty sure they're not having 30 people input into what their Instagram story is going to be that day. We don't have 30 people, but you get, I think, we certainly inspire, we have a rule that we're trying to instill, which is the 70-20-10 rule, where 10% of our time is purely based on innovation. And that innovation opportunity has one stakeholder, right? And it doesn't have a long list of stakeholders, because to be able to innovate and to be able to be wildly creative, you need processes to support that.
Absolutely. And this actually kind of leads into this question. It's like, what are some of the biggest mistakes you've seen with marketers trying to use these new types of platforms?
I mean, listen, I think social is probably the worst example of chasing the shiny new toy, right? We love chasing the shiny new toy, right? And I'm not, TikTok is that shiny new toy. And listen, TikTok's reach is absolutely exorbitant. I think I would have been maybe sitting here smiling with a different perspective if TikTok was, no longer available in the US now. I think, as I said, for us, I think the size of the prize is still large enough on the major social platforms that we're not looking to pivot off into newer social platforms. But yeah, I think there's I forgot my train of thought now.
Well, it's a balance a little bit, right? You want to test the waters of those new platforms, see how they perform for your brands, but then also, I think, and I think we were speaking about this earlier too. It's like the safety aspect of Snap and TikTok, which was, not in question. I don't want to say it in that way, but more that they're not necessarily as a known quantity, where YouTube and like partnerships with people like Studio71, we have those processes in place to ensure some level of brand safety with content alignment. Whereas as these newer platforms are coming out, and as honestly GenZ, I feel like it's all over, right? In terms of how quickly they go from one platform to the next. And so, if they don't want their old parents or grandparents even on the platforms that they're on, so there is that shift, right? But you want to make sure that you're being smart about how you're marketing on them and ensuring that level of brand safety, especially for like that recognizable, but also like, I don't know if sweet is the word you would use to describe Lego, but like just, almost innocent and pure, right? And that's what they're, that's really like what you would think about from a brand perspective.
Yes. We like to be sweet and pure.
Yeah. Not completely, but I kind of to that vein too, you cut me off. You can cut me off.
So sorry. We just, we need to wrap it up. Thank you so much. Cause I've seen a lot of brands when you talk about like taking that $1 million TV commercial and you don't want to put a place for it. I told and that around like you have social content studio, like it's social content, but I imagine a lot of the content coming out of your team does that make its way into like outside of the
Oh, I'm losing you.
Oh no.
I lost you. I got you at the part. I lost you where you said, does my social content, I imagine you said, influence other creative outputs, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's right. So like, you don't post your ads on social, but when you create real content on social, does that power any ads or any content online or in any other environments?
Certainly. Yeah. I mean, I think, listen, the traditional media landscape still is what it is. And I don't think there's going to be a world where my team will be briefed on creating a TV commercial. I think, the longer across the spectrum we get to creating less ads, to creating great content, which is where I'm constantly trying to get us as a business to move to, less ads, create good content can become the ads. That's the ultimate goal for us, right? So I think we have had some of those opportunities with sort of longer form YouTube content that we've created that then has been repurposed into YouTube ads. So yes, but as I said, I think there's that spectrum, right? I'm a big believer, right? And I think The CMO for Burger King has said this, right? If it smells like an ad, looks like an ad, it's going to be an ad, and that's how your consumer is going to consume it. Whereas if it's great content because it's highly engaging and serves the audience in that way, the results are going to be far greater. And that's the place that I'd much rather play than create a commercial.
Yep. Makes sense. I appreciate that. And yeah, it's crazy. Most audience, like 74% of people say that they avoid ads. So it's even like consciously ingrained, like that we don't want anything to do with ads, but everyone is following brands on social media and seeking out like high quality content. So that, yeah.
Especially when you think of Gen Z, like this audience doesn't like traditional advertising. They are not, they are skipping commercials all day long. So I think, yeah, it's definitely, if we're talking about Gen Z, the traditional marketing or media efforts are less relevant potentially.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, James. And thank you for Kristin. Great job moderating. So for our next session, it's actually not a fireside chat, but it's going to be a keynote by Adam Pierno. And Adam is the